Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to have this conversation with Arne today. And for those who aren't aware, Arne is an industry pioneer who's helped shape the early web, and he's continued to be on the leading edge of domains. He's held major roles at companies like Microsoft and GoDaddy, among others, and now he lends his expertise to Decentraweb as an advisor. Arne, so great to have you here. I'd love to start this off with you just walking us through your journey from the early days of Web1 to now advising a Web3 venture.
Absolutely. And I'm blushing for all the credit you gave me, but that's okay. Yeah. So, I spent 26 years at Microsoft. Very early, I got into internet access. We built something called MSN. I'm sure you guys have heard about.
It was the first messenger I used was MSN Messenger.
MSN Messenger. Yeah. So I was part of the team that rolled out MSN globally, and then continued kind of along that way and built all the company's cloud infrastructure globally. So, and that sort of evolved into these hyperscale, crazy, data centers with, billion-dollar budgets every year. I mean, just massively investing in infrastructure. And then the last couple of years at Microsoft, I was part of the Windows Azure team and built some of the underlying components for Azure and was part of the, launching the product. And obviously they haven't looked back since. It just continues to grow and grow.
Yeah, and I think Azure is what ChatGPT is running on right now. So that's a pretty big part you played there.
Yeah. It was a fun time. After Microsoft, after 26 years of phenomenal time, I joined a company called ServiceNow that I'm sure people are aware of as CTO. And kind of my primary role was to kind of get the company ready for IPO and really scaling out their cloud infrastructure. So we did that, very successful IPO. And again, this company, I kind of look at the growth rate. It still keeps growing. It's just a fantastic company. And then after ServiceNow, I joined GoDaddy. Very similar situation. They were kind of ready to go public. They needed to scale out their platforms. So I joined as CIO and later also as CTO.
And CIO is Chief Information Officer?
Right? Yeah, exactly. So we took them public as well. Very successful company still, of course, as you know, it's the world's largest domain registrar. At GoDaddy, I really got exposed to the domain world, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, today.
Yep.
And then I retired from GoDaddy 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm advising a number of companies like Decentraweb, which of course is the most important one in my portfolio. But I'm having a good time.
Yeah, it's great to hear that Decentraweb's your most important one. That's really encouraging. Now you mentioned you like the really early days of the internet. So I want to ask you, like, if you remember, when did you first get an email address? If you what year?
I think it was 1984-ish, I think.
Wow.
Something like that, 1984.
Yeah. Yeah. Long before people took it seriously. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, that was a big deal. Email was like magic, back then.
That's interesting because I know that in the early days of email, people didn't really take it seriously either. And a lot of people didn't think that there'd be any need to have an email address. And we kind of see parallels now where people don't take Web3 seriously. So I'm curious, after with all the time that you spent at GoDaddy, Microsoft, ServiceNow in the early days, what kind of parallels do you see between that time and in Web3 today?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it in sort of as very disruptive technology waves. I mean, that's how I like to think about it, where things that really changed tech industry and also changed society. So if I think back from my early days that we just talked about, the first real wave was personal computing. I'm not sure if you remember, but Bill Gates talked about a computer on every desk in every home, which sounded like outrageous back then, but it happened.
Yeah, it did.
So that was
in every pocket
first
now.
Wave. In their pocket too, yeah. So that's personal computing. That was then replaced with internet access, Web1, email. We talked about that already, MSN. We're competing with AOL. But we were really building out, essentially what we were doing, we were building out the commercial internet, massive investments in network infrastructure. That led into Web2, which is Web2. That's where we are now. Yeah, a lot of network computing, SaaS-based computing, et cetera.
Right.
What's interesting at this point in time is we essentially have 3 waves, happening at the same time. 3 disruptive waves. The first one is cloud computing. Obviously, I started to work on that with Windows Azure. But that's kind of a wave that's sort of in the middle. It's halfway through. There's still a lot of migrations to cloud that is going to happen over the next probably 10 years. And then you have two new waves that are happening at the same time. One is AI. Will have a tremendously disruptive impact on society, just tremendously.
Right.
And then I have Web3 as more potentially totally disruptive force. I don't know yet if it's going to be of the same magnitude as AI or cloud computing, but we certainly have a team at Decentraweb and other teams in the Web3 world that are trying to make it to have that type of impact.
Yeah, for sure. You can see some of the smartest people in the world working in Web3, in addition to AI and cloud computing, of course. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how they, function together and kind of bounce off of each other.
Yeah.
So I want to transition a little bit to domains, and since that's going to be a big part of what we're talking about today. So I think maybe a good thing that I want to hear your perspective on is like, what's the difference between Web2 domains like .com or subdomains on .com or even just .com itself versus the new Web3 domains like what we see with Decentraweb?
Yeah, I mean, a great question. Well, first we have to, say the DNS system has served us really, really well. It held out for 40 years, and it's still operating. But it's really old technology. It's centralized. It's controlled by ICANN, completely controlled by ICANN. On the flip side, with Web3, domains are decentralized. They're immutable. It's kind of the difference between open, modern thinking that we have in Web3 and legacy 1980s style thinking, very centralized in Web2. So that's how I would, contrast them. One important aspect of Web3 versus Web2 is that Web3 domains are more secure, substantially more secure, in fact, than Web2 domains, and much better protection against domain hijacking, which is a really annoying and problematic area for industry.
Right. So you see, and the reason behind that is you would say is because you need to be able to sign a transaction with a wallet with a Web3 domain versus with a Web2 domain, you still have a centralized company like GoDaddy that is susceptible to, social hacking and things like that.
Social hacking. I remember we had, people calling into customer service and they're, crying and say they lost their password. Can you please reset it, etc. And it turns out to be a scam. It's a big industry issue. And in the Web3 world, you need the private key to gain control. So it's the owner pretty much needs to give it to the hacker for that to happen. Sure. So it's much more secure. If we think about processes around Web2 versus Web3, Web2 is built on a centralized thinking. It's a very cumbersome process. Takes a long time to register a new TLD. In most cases, if you apply to register, you're going to be denied, and it's extremely expensive, $185,000 to register a TLD. Compare that to Web3. You have unlimited TLDs at very low cost. It's also very easy to become a registrar on Web3. You don't need the type of accreditation you need in the Web2 world. So it's much more streamlined, much easier.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the different types of registrars maybe a little bit later. But I wanted to circle back a little bit because I'm curious as to, you mentioned that there's going to be a lot more TLDs now because, as you said, like with Decentraweb, if there's a TLD that's available, you can just create it. Whereas with ICANN, you have to apply to this massive nonprofit corporation, ICANN, that controls all domains, and the percentage that they deny, I think, is in like the high 90%. Like it's a vast majority,
at least.
Yeah. So
my understanding is this year they've only approved 30 new TLDs.
Yeah, versus the 12,000 TLDs that are minted on Decentraweb in the past couple of years. So with that being the case, how do you think that this is going to change the domain market as Web3 domains get much more popular?
Well, I think Web2 domains will continue to be there. .com, .net, I think is kind of continue to be kind of a gold standard and will hold up well. Lower quality domains, it'll be a very different story, and there'll be sort of competition between the new Web3 domains and the Web2 domains. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
yeah, I'd say so. What about in terms of valuations? Because right now you're limited to so few TLDs, which means that the supply is very constrained. But now we're going to have just like a much bigger supply, but then we're also going to have like a much bigger amount of use cases. You can kind of just speculate on this, but I'm curious as your thoughts on how it's going to affect the valuation of existing Web2 domains.
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen, Web3 domains are very aggressively priced, much, much lower than Web2 domains. So that's obviously going to put downwards pressure on domain pricing in the Web2 world, especially for low quality domains. Not that big of an impact on like a .com or .net, one of these very high quality domains. But yeah, there will certainly be downwards pressure. But at the same time, we're greatly expanding the market. So prices go down, but the volume goes up. But net, I think it's going to be win-win for everyone.
So we'll probably see the .com, .net domains, the ones that are on TLDs that are still going to be highly sought after. The best ones will still maintain their value, but yes, because there's going to be so many new ones, that overall, like maybe the average price will probably go down because there's going to be so much more supply.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned, like how easy it is to become a registrar. You don't need to get accreditation through ICANN. Do you foresee many more companies become registrars, like enterprises becoming Web3 domain registrars?
Yeah, I mean, there are scenarios where I think enterprises will be registrars. We haven't talked about it yet, but one of the features we're rolling out with our Web3 domain system is identity. And in that scenario, there will be use cases where an enterprise will want to be a registrar. We can talk more about it later, but yeah, it's definitely a useful scenario.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think especially when you start thinking about like domains as identity, and yeah, I would like to circle back on that. In terms of enterprises adopting Web3 domains in general, what do you think are like the biggest challenges that they're facing in doing it or that are preventing them from doing it?
If you think about sort of the perception of Web3, you're reading like every day about some kind of coin disappearing. There are 20,000 or 24,000 coins out there. There are over 1,000 blockchains. So, if I'm an enterprise and I want to sort of start moving into the Web3 world, who can I trust? What's going to happen? Are they going to be around? Second concern is going to be around compliance. Are, coins going to be deemed financial instruments or currencies? What's the implication of that? That's a big one. The third one is really around resources and skill set. Enterprises, whether CTO org or a CIO organization are kind of maxed out with current priorities. They want to start bringing in Web3. It needs to fit on the priority list. They don't have the talent. It's actually quite an uphill battle to go from Web2 to Web3 from a skill set perspective. It's a completely different approach. And those are kind of the forces that sort of move against adoption of Web3 in the enterprise. But, it's not going to stop it. It's just considerations that we need to have.
Right, because a lot of these, you're talking about large enterprises, they're not quick-moving enterprises. They don't know which blockchain to trust. They don't know which blockchain project to trust. They don't want to, right. The overall reputation of crypto can definitely be something at the very least that will slow it down. There's the regulatory uncertainty that they're facing. That's something that's just been an ongoing issue with crypto. The complexity of trying to make the change from Web2. You're talking about, these companies that have been doing things a certain way for decades to now have to revamp their infrastructure into something completely different. And then the hiring that comes in with that. Yeah, those are really good reasons.
Yeah, and as an anecdote, because I think what this leads to is if you want to be successful as a Web3 company, you have to think about all these things, and you have to build credibility for your services. We were talking to a European registrar. We met with the CTO, and he said he was very happy that we were there. And he said, I've been trying to understand and get into this blockchain thing for a while, but I don't want to work with cowboys. And that's kind of like that's the outside view. It's a kind of Wild West, and if you're a conservative CTO or CIO, you got to be very cautious. And as a Web3 company, for us, and my advice to other Web3 companies is to have a leadership team that has the credibility and can help build trust with enterprises and potential customers down the road.
Yeah, and that actually makes me think of maybe a fourth challenge for them, and that's just the career risk that these CTOs and whoever else making these decisions is going to take as they choose the wrong company to work with, or if they do something wrong and lose some private keys or expose some private keys, there is a pretty substantial kind of risk to the individuals in the company as well.
Yeah, and many of these enterprises are very conservative, so they need to balance the risk. If it goes to the board, board members don't understand the technology, but they read about Bitcoin and people going to jail
and FTX
and all this stuff. So they're like, why would we ever touch that? But it's going to happen. But the players, the Web3 players, kind of need to step up and not be cowboys, but really build credibility and build stability and have more transparency. But that's going to come with time.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Decentraweb has been focusing on since the beginning, has been building it up, doing it right the first time, and being there's such a challenging balance of moving fast enough so that you can still be the one that gains the adoption, but not moving so fast that things go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is knowing when things are almost never done, especially in the Web3 world. There's always changing protocols, and things are, you thought you bet on this protocol because it had these attributes, but now it's changed. So keeping up with that is very, very difficult.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's a big part of why they chose Ethereum. So far, it seems like it's going to be the standard for every other blockchain that's doing smart contracts will in some way need to connect with it.
It's got the stability and credibility, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and security. So I wanted to switch back. We did touch on identity, but I wanted to dig into it a little bit further. You mentioned a little bit about these domains being used as maybe corporate identity, but what kind of role do you think the Web3 domains play in this evolution of digital identity and self-sovereign identity?
I mean, identity theft is just a huge problem for industry. And the one thing that's very concerning is it's going to be greatly amplified by the implementation of AI. So now you have AI bots trying to steal your identity. And I mean, it's a terrible industry problem. Someone who gets exposed to identity theft, it's devastating. And, passwords are insecure. Web2 domains are susceptible to social engineering. So we really need an immutable, highly secure identity mechanism. And Decentraweb domains can provide that function for enterprise, communities, personal identities. I don't see it as, we're building sort of a standalone identity system. It'll be integrated with enterprises' existing security mechanisms. So this is going to be widely adopted. And if you look further out, and I'm speculating a little bit now, but you could certainly envision governments wanting to implement this kind of immutable identity platform for national identity systems like my number name system in Japan and similar systems, where it needs the absolute highest level integrity and immutable blockchain domain names is kind of the best we have.
What's the significance of the my number thing in Japan? Is that like their social security number kind of thing, or?
Yeah, it's essentially a social security number thing. It's a little newer than our social security. And there are many countries that don't have this type of system at all. Eventually, they're probably going to need to build one. I think the technology we have could play a major role in sort of broader national identity systems. Sure.
You can have whatever the number is, .Japan as your subdomain that is your kind of version of a social security number. Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. And I also think when you were mentioning, the issues with social hacking and identity theft, something that I think is something that people haven't quite realized is with deepfakes, even with the new kind of tools that are scanning your face to prove who you are on a they'll say get your mobile phone out and scan your face to make sure that you are who you say you are. Soon you'll be able to do deepfakes of that, and then you can pretend to be, even in a Zoom call and wherever, pretend to be other people. So being able to sign a transaction that's on a blockchain or sign a signature on a blockchain to prove who you are.
Yeah, you need something to anchor your identity. With all the deepfake, you can't trust the video, you can't trust the voice, but there's one thing that you can trust. And I think we have the technology to help make that happen.
Yeah, and kind of leading into that as far as what kind of technology Decentraweb has, I think a lot of people have been curious. I've seen people ask it in the Discord, as we've mentioned, you're an advisor to Decentraweb, but in what way do you advise, and what is your role at Decentraweb?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I am an advisor, so we should make that clear. I'm not a full-time employee, but essentially my role is, I would say, twofold. One is to help the team, just bringing my experience, my knowledge as much as possible to kind of help set the right direction, help make the right decisions. That's part of it. The second part of my role is use my network. So I've been around, like from the MSN days. So I built a pretty good network. Part of my role there is to kind of get Decentraweb connected with enterprises, CIOs, technology leaders, and have a discussion about partnerships, integrations, working together. Those are the two areas that I focus on.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable that, we're really fortunate to have you on the team because you have what you're talking about with the Web2 domain registrar that didn't want to work with a cowboy, to have someone like you on the team that can go and reach out to these Web2 companies, because I don't know of any other Web3 domain company that is pushing into Web2 space in the same way that we are. I think that that's something that's much harder for a Web3 domain company to do. And I think that we have a really good shot at doing it.
Yeah, I'm thinking of myself as sort of the bridge between Web2 and Web3 on the team. So yeah, absolutely.
So as an advisor at Decentraweb, what would you say excites you most about Decentraweb's vision and potential?
We're taking on an enormous challenge. We talked, in the beginning, we talked about these disruptive technology waves. And I think I said, I'm not sure if Web3 is going to be disruptive in the same sense as AI, but that's where we're aiming. And we have sort of the potential to transform completely how industries using names and identities online. It's just a staggering opportunity. If you think about identities, names, friendly names for wallets, etc., all of these type of names and identities built on a extremely robust platform, immutable on the blockchain. That's incredibly compelling and really changes industry. We got really big challenges ahead, no question. But I feel really good about the team. They're working hard. They're absolute experts in their field. So I hope really good things are going to come out of it.
I couldn't agree more. And I think based on what I've seen, being part of the team, being in the meetings every week, I'm also just an advisor, not a full-time team member, but even still, just seeing the progress and seeing the caliber of the team really, really excites me about it. Absolutely.
Great.
All right, Arne, well, it's been awesome having you here. I really appreciate you coming on, spending your time here and sharing your insights with us, and really looking forward to the next time we can chat.
You bet. Thank you. I had a really good time. Good to chat. Thank you.